What happens when two young creators imagine the world's greatest symbol of justice, but spend much of their own lives fighting for justice themselves? Today, we're going beyond the cape, beyond the famous S, and into the legal, personal, and deeply human battle that shaped Superman. Welcome back to Gimme 5, the book review and author interview show where I go beyond the back cover and meet the person behind the pages. I'm your host, Elizabeth O'Carroll, and today's conversation is about creativity, ownership, legacy, and the complicated history behind one of the most recognizable characters ever created. My guest today is William Bernhardt, the award-winning author of more than 60 books, including the best-selling Ben Kincaid novels and the Daniel Pike legal thriller series. His writing career has crossed an extraordinary number of genres and forms, including legal thrillers, historical fiction, poetry, writing instruction, plays, a musical, children's stories, biography, and puzzles. He is also the founder of WriterCon and the president of Bernhardt Books, and the mentor whose students have gone on to publish with major publishing houses. He's also become a Jeopardy champion in 2013, has trekked through the Himalayas, dug for dinosaurs, gone paragliding, and jumped out of an airplane. Apparently because writing more than 60 books did not provide enough excitement. Oklahoma State University called him Oklahoma's Renaissance man. And after reading that resume, I think they might actually have been showing some restraint. The book we're focusing on today is The Superman Wars, a battle for truth, justice, and an American icon. It explores the creation of Superman and the decade-long struggle involving the writer, Jerry Siegel, artist Joe Shuster, publishers, lawyers, contracts, families, credit, and control. Drawing on new witnesses, unpublished manuscripts, personal letters, and extensive historical research, the book asks the powerful question: how did a character created to defend the vulnerable become connected to one of the most painful creator rights battles in popular culture? Let's welcome William Bernhardt to the show. Come on. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
Great. Welcome to the Gimme 5 book review and author interview show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. Should we give 5 or what?
Yeah, high five. Okay, so we're going to get to know the person first. So before the best-selling novels, the awards, the legal career, and everything else on that rather intimidating resume, who was the young William Bernhardt, and what first convinced you that writing would be a part of your life?
Oh, I was just another nerdy kid who preferred to be inside reading a book instead of doing other things. And the happy thing is that where we lived in this relatively small town in Oklahoma, this was an era when people still walked to and from school. And the library was pretty close to that path anyway, so I could go anytime I wanted and found all these wonderful books. I had a lovely home, but not replete with books, and I pretty much read everything I was ever going to read pretty quickly. So the library was a real benefit, real plus. And a lot of librarians there really took an interest in this nerdy kid who kept coming in and suggesting things and, moving me on. Here, you're done with that. Let's move on to, and it really made a big difference. I started reading everything in sight, and pretty soon I started thinking about wanting to be, well, first a librarian, because, they lived where the books live. But at some point I realized, maybe about the time I turned 7, I realized that these books aren't just grown or, spontaneously generated. Somebody writes them. This is like their job. They sit down and do this for a living. And I thought, well, that's the job I want. And so I started writing things and sending them off. Got my first rejection letter when I was 11.
Oh, really?
Still got it. I can prove that one. It's still back there somewhere. And a lot more after that.
How did you receive that rejection letter at 11?
I don't think it, devastated me that much. I didn't really even understand, how cool it would be to be published or how unusual. And, I think I was excited at the prospect, but whatever, you just got to roll with the punches, right? Especially when you're 11. I got a lot more rejection letters after that, but I hung in there, which is, the only reason we're having this conversation. There are a lot of talented people out there, but the perseverance that's required to break in and actually make a career of it, that's, I think, more rare.
That is so fascinating. So when was the first time someone outside your family took your writing seriously, or even your family?
Yeah, let's not start there. Some first time, I don't know. I don't feel like anybody ever took it very seriously. I did get some good feedback when I was in college, and obviously taking anything I could do that related to writing in any way, means, whatever. But even then, I sort of think I was more tolerated than anything else. But I wanted to be published, by gosh, that was my dream. I wanted to see my name on the spine of a book. So I just kept writing and sending things out. And of course, there's a point to all that too, because writing's like anything else. I don't believe for a minute that anybody's born with like a special writing gene that makes them a better writer. You get there by practicing, like I was saying, like anything else. A lot of it comes from reading voraciously, and a lot of it comes from writing. And the more you do, even if you're getting rejected constantly for a reason, because it's not very good, you keep at it and you learn and eventually get better and eventually have the right book in the right place and the right time. But that usually doesn't happen overnight. So again, perseverance, that's the big thing.
Yeah. So was there ever a point when you nearly gave up?
Really not. I don't know why, but I guess I just wanted it badly enough, But no, I don't think there was ever a time when I didn't rewrite in my spare time, because I've got a full-time job too, and send things out and just, keep trying, try new stuff. Worked my way all the way through that writer's market book, what pre-internet way of finding an agent. And really didn't have much luck, but I kept slugging away at it. And eventually, once I had an agent, I had a publishing deal with Random House in about 3 months. It was the agent that was, I've sort of veered from your question, but anyway, that was the tough part.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And of course, I could see in the background there, the book that we're discussing today is the Superman Wars.
Yeah, there it is. Well, if I don't put it out, who will? So
a lot of us.
Yeah, good.
So so jumping into, there's so much about you that is just so fascinating that leads up to these books. So let's talk about the element of the lawyer and the storyteller. So you are both legally trained and an accomplished storyteller. How did practicing law change the way you understand conflict, motive, truth, and the stories people tell about themselves?
That's interesting. One thing I think you learn early on that is different from, say, television dramas set in the courtroom, where they're usually, the attorney or whoever the protagonist is the good guy and anybody opposing him is the bad guy. But that's not really how it works in real life. Although, your clients always feel like they're in the right, well, most of the time. And and the other guys are the bad guys. But particularly in commercial disputes, that's not even relevant. It's two people fighting over the same pot of money. And I've had, even though most of my books have gone into criminal courts, I've kind of kept the same approach when I think about good guys and bad guys, that, you can have an antagonist, and you should have a good one and a strong one, but they don't have to be mad scientists or anything. They're just capable people who want something else than what the protagonist wants. It's like agenda conflict, which courtroom's like a microcosm of, because it's all conflict, one side against the other, and they're in diametrically opposite positions. So, that to me is what makes a good courtroom drama. And in a way, that does kind of come from real life.
It really does. So does a lawyer look for evidence while a novelist looks for the emotional truth?
Yes. What the lawyer really looks for is the argument or the story, to use your terms, because usually the facts are not that much in dispute. The question is just what's the spin or what's the story and how are you going to present this and things like that. Not always, but in most cases, they're semi-close cases because otherwise, why would they go to trial? And so, story evidence is good too, but the storytelling ability is really important in the courtroom, and of course in the courtroom drama too, because what you're really developing there, really to an extent that doesn't even happen in real life courtrooms, is getting the whole story, which nobody really ever does in a courtroom, maybe before or after, even if you've read everything about the case, really understanding what was going on in these people's heads when this happened. That's fairly rare, I think, but that's every one of my books, basically, or of the courtroom dramas anyway, because at the end, like any good detective, the novelist, not the novelist, the attorney explains what really happened, and you do get some sense of the why and the what the significance might be.
So then would you say that a courtroom already contains the structure of a novel? It sounds like.
Yeah, it does. And of course, there are many stories that have been completely set in the courtroom or almost completely, because it is, like I was saying, a conflict in a bottle, basically. And that works pretty well.
So as a lawyer, you have to be objective, finding the evidence, the truth that speaks for itself. Whereas in storytelling, it's more subjective with the emotional. Have these two instincts ever competed while you were writing?
Oh, the Kirk-Spock dilemma is what you're saying. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, always this is why historically people always say lawyers are terrible writers, which is not true at all. In reality, lawyers usually have verbal skills above average, but are trained to write in this rigid, logical, overblown sentences that go on for half a page, 15-letter words when 3-letter words would do, that kind of writing, which is not good writing. And what you'll see anytime, and there have been cases, obviously, of people who went from practicing law to actually, writing novels, is that they just have to learn to write differently. They got to forget everything. And now we are going to emphasize emotion, because what good is a novel that doesn't have any emotional content, or you don't know what people are thinking or feeling or what's going on with them? So, that's completely different.
Absolutely, leaving out that human element. I'd have to stop at page 2. It's like, all right, it's too dry, right?
Get rid of that. What would you call that? Sort of the logical professor voice, which is rarely going to make a novel sing.
No, put you to sleep for sure. Good sedative. So let's talk about your career without many boundaries, because we want to know the man behind the writing of this book.
Mm-hmm.
So you've written novels, poetry, plays, writing guides, a musical, children's stories, a biography, and even puzzles. So what connects all these forms to you or for you?
Oh, that's too hard. I don't think there is anything except that they all represent something that I thought would be fun and interesting to do, because anytime you start a book, it's very time consuming. That I don't care whether it's the children's book, which was probably 32 pages, or the biography, which is over 400 pages. I think that every book takes a long time and a lot of time and energy. So there's just no point in doing it unless it's going to be interesting or fun. Work at the same time, but as work goes, it could be a lot worse. That's what I look for, and that's why I haven't done the same thing over and over again every time. I mean, I've written a lot of series books with series characters, and goodness knows that's nice, because that's the closest thing you're ever going to have to a safe bet in the writing world. If it did this well on the last one, then it'll probably do more or less the same this time. So do it again. But there's really only so many times you can do even that, even when your characters are kind of tool to be versatile. Still, I just don't want to write the same book over and over again, and don't need to. And so I guess that's my explanation of why, as you said, I've pivoted to nonfiction here.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there one question, emotion, or human conflict that you discover yourself returning to regardless of the genre?
Probably affection. We're in this together. We're better together. Mutual affection is what I think. You always want to have something at the end of the book that leaves sort of a note of sweetness, if possible, because most of the book may have been running and chasing and shooting and stuff like that. But, give it something at the end. And usually if it's really just a way of reminding everybody that even through all this, the thriller elements, these are people. They're meant to seem like people, and they have emotions just like you.
Absolutely. So of all your non-writing adventures, digging for dinosaurs, trekking through the Himalayas, paragliding, scuba diving, or becoming a Jeopardy champion, woohoo! Which experience produced the best story, and which one produced the worst decision?
The best story? Gee whiz. I've never written about Jeopardy, but that is something I get asked about a lot. So I'm going to say those stories are probably the most popular. And what was the other one? The most interesting or something like that?
Yeah. So which one produced the best story and which one produced the worst decision?
Oh, worst decision. Yeah, these are so hard. I don't regret any of that. Some of it was probably imprudent. Did you say parachuting? Jumping out of an airplane at 10,000 feet? That's not really, paraglide, that's nothing compared to jumping out of an airplane. But I don't have any regrets about any of it. They were all fun, new things. I'm not going to go scuba diving every day, but I think it's cool that I did. It was really an amazing experience.
Yeah, I agree. I went skydiving, and my son and I went skydiving.
Really?
And so jumping out of that perfectly good airplane, people are like, and so what were you thinking?
It just goes against every grain. I don't know how you did it, but we were in this biplane thing, and I had to walk out on the wing, and then when I got the signal, let go. And that's just, it goes against every instinct in your body. Let go. Are you kidding? But I finally made myself do it.
But you didn't have a tandem instructor on your back?
Nope. There were other people who jumped at the same time, but we weren't connected or anything. No.
Oh, that is truly brave. I wasn't that brave. They had a door that came up like a garage door on the side of the plane, and there was an instructor that was strapped to you. And so then you just fell out, right? And he had a camera on his wrist, and he could.
I think you had a more high-end experience than I did.
Making you jump from the wing of a plane. I couldn't have done that. For sure. Yeah. You are a brave man. You are your own Superman, for sure.
Thanks.
Well. And thinking of Superman, let's start jumping into the Superman wars. So why this story? After writing more than 60 books, what was it about Jerry Siegel and the creation of Superman that made you feel this is the story I need to tell now?
Well, it's because this book, as became more apparent to me as I researched, and didn't know the half of it when I started, but this is not only an important creator rights battle, Jerry Siegel fighting for the rights to his creation, Superman. Anyway, where did I break the sentence? It's become the most important creator rights battle of modern times, and has influenced all kinds of creators, not just in the comic book industry. Since I wish it had helped Jerry more, but it's helped his family, and it's helped many, many people who have used the same claims he did. But you got to understand that was 70 years of litigation. Anyway, you asked me how I got started on it. That was it. I think, I deal with writers, I interact with writers, and writers are my favorite people. I host this annual writing conference, I think WriterCon. It's Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City. And I see how writers get targeted all the time by vanity presses, or now it's AI scam deals. And, we try and circulate information about these things, but even, it's a cautionary tale too, because even though Jerry Siegel's problems started in the 1930s and things have changed, they haven't changed that much. And the vultures are still out there. They may look different, but there are people out there grabbing IP all the time. So you got to protect yourself. Anyway, that's how I got started on it. I love comics too, but what I really wanted people to understand, because this really is actually a controversial story. The version that the comics company puts out is wildly different from virtually everyone else, and there's a lot of so-called Jerry bashing going on online as people focus on, well, they made some money, yeah, in the early days until that was all gone, or what else do they say? They shouldn't have signed that. Well, yeah, Jerry knew that. He lived with that mistake his whole life. I don't get it. We all made mistakes, especially when we were in our early 20s, but I didn't create Superman. He did. And that alone, he's invented a whole new genre of fiction. He gave credence to this thing called the comic book, which, suddenly was selling in huge numbers. So I think he deserves our respect.
Yes, absolutely. And it floors me that negative news sells more than positive news. And, why can't we celebrate the good stuff too? Why do we always have to find the dirt on somebody, But I can see where you're being a lawyer tied in with this whole story, because you had to investigate this.
Unraveling 7 years of litigation, plus a critical bankruptcy that gave new people possession of the comic book company. Yeah, legal background was helpful for all of that. I should explain for people who haven't read the book yet that we're talking about Jerry Siegel, who was a kid in Cleveland during the Depression, an 11th grader, when he comes up with this idea for this character, eventually from another planet. It went through various iterations, but eventually a guy from another planet called Superman, who has all these amazing powers. And he got his pal Joe Shuster to draw it. And Jerry spent years marketing this, trying to get a newspaper comic strip, because in this era, that was a big deal. Everybody read the newspaper comics. It's the exact opposite now from now, when, comic books and graphic novels and manga are hugely popular. Newspaper strips, not so much. But that's what Jerry wanted. And only after he'd exhausted all of those did he finally tell a guy he'd worked with on other features, the Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, that he would agree to let Superman be published in the comic company. Unfortunately, for reasons, these guys with mob ties use the legal system. It's all in the book, to acquire the company. And suddenly Jerry doesn't know who he's working with, but they get him to sign a release to get paid. And it also contains a clause that says, oh, by the way, by signing this, you give us the rights to all your characters and everything in the story. And that's how they lost control, without, I think, really even realizing what they had done. But when Superman comes out, it's an immediate smash sensation. But they don't own it anymore. Jerry has lost control.
Oh, what a shame for him. My goodness. Yeah. So at what point did your professional curiosity become a personal mission with Superman? Because
I just wanted to tell the story because it really is kind of, can't emphasize enough. Even I just talked to my sister, who could care less about comic books, but she really enjoyed the book because it's history and biography, and she might be a little biased, but anyway, I think this is a story that anybody can get wrapped up in, because it really is like an underdog who created this champion of the underdog, only to lose all control. But, there were a lot of people griping about the way they were treated by comic book companies at that time. Jerry Siegel was the one who stood up and becomes the first American author to sue his own publisher. I think he knew the odds were long, but he decided to go for it. He would rather basically risk everything than, not have tried. And
Good
of
for
course,
him.
as you already know, or there wouldn't be in a book, the suit he files in 1947 does not go well for him. Part of his lawsuit came from the fact that the company had run a new feature he'd created and offered them, but they rejected, called Superboy. Okay, semi-new, but anyway, it would be a new feature, Superman when he's younger. And while he was overseas serving his country, they ran it anyway, even though they'd never bought it. So that was clearly, and they then turned that into a Superboy series. So that was clearly inappropriate. And Jerry did win on that issue and got some money from it, but he did not recover the rights to Superman. And worse yet, they fired him from his own feature. And as if it couldn't get any worse, then they remove his name, Jerry and Joe's names, from the credits. Before then, it's always Superman, created by Siegel and Shuster. No more. They've been erased. Even when they would reprint older stories that originally had their credit, they'd color over it, And how did that benefit the company? That's just spite, it seems like to me.
So corrupt, that poor man. Oh my gosh.
So he was pretty devastated, but he doesn't just sit around whining. He does do some of that and send some letters around 51 that are pretty out there. It's all in the book. But put yourself in his head. He's seeing Superman everywhere. I got to talk to his daughter, Laura, who was born in the early, she probably doesn't want me to say, but the point is that when the George Reeves television series would come on the television, her dad would leave the room. It was just too painful to see, there's his creation, but is his name on it anywhere? No. And plus, of course, the series was successful and was making money for somebody, but it wasn't him. And he tries another lawsuit in 65 under the copyright law and loses that. There's a big PR campaign in 75 that finally results in him and Jerry getting what I would call very small pensions. Someone in the Village Voice said they've solved their problem by paying them the same amount they pay their secretaries. That was the term at the time. We're talking $20,000, which is more then than now, but I was alive in 75. It wasn't that much then. And it gets better with cost of living increases, but there's still a sense that this is not the way we should treat the guy who came up with Superman and basically launched the entire superhero genre that all the comic companies are now dependent upon. Or not, I don't guess Archie is dependent upon it, although they have had superheroes before. But to me, this is such an injustice. We could argue about the legalities of this all night long, but removing an artist's name from their own work, that is just wrong. That's morally, ethically wrong.
And how could the legal system not see that? I mean, it's plain as day, right? It's like, can't you see the injustice here? And then everybody's blind eye, because if you want to know what's wrong with the world, follow the money, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, today I think it would clearly be a retaliatory firing coupled with, additional punishment. But
the daily reminder.
Corporations always have an edge, yeah. And now we have the Berne Convention, which is an international art treaty, which absolutely forbids removing an artist's credit from their work. The U.S. finally signed that in the 1980s, but that didn't help Jerry. I don't know if anything really could have, except what he did was keep standing up and going to bat and waving his arms and saying, no, I'm not going to let you forget about me. I'm not going to let you trample me. The final lawsuit was filed after he passed because he didn't want to bring another one. He said they'll cut off the pension. And he's probably right, and he didn't want to take the risk. So the suit is continued by his wife, who, by the way, was the model for the original model for Lois Lane, and
Aw.
she's takes us all the way to 93 when they're still demanding her deposition again. And then it's picked up by their daughter, Laura, who takes it to, it's not over. I won't spoil everything, but it doesn't end until 2016. But there was I mean, they're still not getting 1% of what Superman makes, but there is something, and that's good. So
Wow.
and
So,
and we got the credits restored. Now it not only it says Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and now beneath that says by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family, an acknowledgement of this family who fought and fought and fought.
wow, even though he's not here to see it, at least maybe he's from above looking down going, oh, it's about time. Right?
Yeah, well, I think he'd be glad to see how much has benefited his family. I think that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, Bill, you're best known for fiction, particularly the legal thrillers that we've been discussing. But why did this story need to be written as a narrative nonfiction rather than transformed into a novel?
Well, that's a good question. At first, I didn't want to write a novel because, even in the narrative mode, I didn't want to fictionalize anything. Like I said before, there's some controversy here, and that would make me much too easily attacked by one faction or another. But I wrote in the narrative nonfiction style, that of, giants like Truman Capote and Norman Mailer, and now, of course, Eric Larson, all great practitioners of it. Basically, I get to use some of the skills I've developed over the years, even when writing nonfiction. And the real advantage is, because you were alluding to this earlier, how people can get kind of caught up in Jerry's story and rooting for him, and he's the underdog. That's only happening, I think, because of the way I wrote the book. I wanted people to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, not just what Jerry did, but why he did it. And so that's why I wrote the book from his viewpoint. But I want to emphasize, I did not make up anything. I did not make up scenes. I didn't invent dialogue. None. Zero. None. It's all, the result of my research.
And that's very powerful. So during this process, what freedoms did you lose when you could no longer invent? Because they're all based on truth.
It's hard. Many times I've thought, boy, I could improve this scene, or I could make this dialogue a little snappier, because, when people are just talking like we are now, it's not going to be as polished as when you sit down and type it out and revise it 6 times. But no, I can't rewrite what people said.
Like
they said what they said, or improve some of the correspondence. There's 10 years of abusive correspondence from the company to Jerry. And then he, as I said, writes some letters, and many times I'd be happy to rewrite those, but that's not what you do when you're writing nonfiction.
Goes against the lawyer grain. So on the flip side of that, what new power did you gain from knowing that the extraordinary events actually happened?
I'm not sure if this is what you mean, but what made me happy was that I was able to bring this all together and make it work as a book. And it really was an enormous amount of research. My wife likes to say that every day I had a new stack of books, but that's not a total exaggeration. And some of that I had to really work to get, but hundreds of books, periodicals, even fanzines, things generated by fans with small circulations. But some did a terrific job of preserving early comics history that would have been lost otherwise. And gosh, I went to 8 different library collections. I interviewed more than 50 people. I'm forgetting 9 different states. That's what I was trying to come up with. And but I was able to, and then bring it all together in one package. And then after you've done all that, you think, oh man, this page doesn't really need to be here. But I went all the way to Laramie, Wyoming to learn this stuff, and don't I have to keep it in? And the answer is no, you don't have to keep it in. You do what's best for the book.
Yes. Awesome. So I'm seeing a bridge here from your book, Justice for All, your earlier novel.
Yeah.
Also explored the conflict between creators and the business controlling their work. Did that novel serve as a bridge to the Superman wars, or did the nonfiction project emerge separately?
No, it totally pointed me in that direction. That's when I first started looking into the Siegel and Shuster story, which I knew a little bit about, but then again, not not nearly as much as there was to know. And I started getting interested in that while I was writing this book, which was a courtroom drama involving a creator rights battle, which I think originally I had in the movie world. But then after I started looking this, I thought, no, comic books, that'll be more fun. But I didn't see any way Daniel Pike could have a client who was doing work back in the Depression. So I had to update it a little bit, moved it to the 60s, I think, and even found a wonderful illustrator who generated some, fake comic book covers, fake, real within the story of the book that end up actually being important to the plot. So that was a lot of fun and totally pointed toward this nonfiction book.
So the Justice for All, did that allow you to explore the issue of Jerry Siegel before emotionally, the historical record, before confronting the historical record? I mean, there had to have been some emotions that came up from you. You could really empathize. I mean, just learning about Jerry, I could really empathize with the pain that he's gone through.
Well, I can. He was very precocious. He, like me, knew like at a very early age that he wanted to be a writer, and he was writing and he was sending things out. He got things published, like I was saying, when he was 1 digit, and continued to get things published, letters and other things all throughout his school. He was publishing in the school newspaper frequently and having a lot of fun doing that. And then he and Joe get interested in comic books, and we end up getting Superman out of that. He got rejected a lot too. Just like me. So, this path to becoming a writer, I can completely relate to. I didn't have some of the troubles he has had, thank goodness, but then I didn't create Superman either. So.
And apparently he did, but then it was stolen from him. So he wasn't given the credit till way after crossing the Rainbow Bridge. God bless him. So let's talk about what you had to unlearn. Before beginning your research, what did you think you knew about the creation of Superman, and what turned out to be incomplete, misleading, or simply wrong?
Well, I alluded to this before, but one of the things critics say is they made so much money in the first couple years. To which my response is, yeah, and the guy who bought the company about a week and a half before Superman came out was a millionaire inside of 1 year. And people start using these websites where they multiply, well, $130, then that's $6,000. No, you got to look at what it could buy at that time to figure out what something was worth. Anyway, I'm getting off on a rabbit hole, obviously, but the fact I did know that they had made some good money in the first years. I'm probably more sympathetic to that now that I'm older and thinking that should have supported them for the rest of their life. Did they invest it wisely? No, but they had no reason to believe this was going to go away. They were young guys and foolish, and I made stupid mistakes in the 20s anyway. Point being that now, as perhaps an older and more seasoned person, I can relate totally to what happened to them, and probably less judgy about the fact that they made some money in the early, that did not last in the early days.
Sure. What a story. So let's move from the symbol to the people, the young men who created him before anyone knew that superheroes would become an industry. Because as you said, we're talking about getting to know Jerry and Joe. So why Jerry is the narrative center, right? And you choose Jerry Siegel as the principal narrative lens for the book. Why was Jerry the person through whom this story needed to be told?
Well, Jerry's the writer, and I'm always, sympathetic to writers. Plus, he was the one who came up with the idea. I'm not taking anything away from Joe Shuster at all. I think his art was perfect for this, but it was Jerry's idea. And even more importantly, Jerry was the one who pushed. Joe was, by all accounts, a super sweet, gentle guy, which is great to work with, but not great when you're trying to get something published. You need a Jerry who pushes and pushes, maybe sometimes pushes too much, too hard, and in the wrong directions. But he's the guy who got this published finally, and he's the one who made them famous and made them some money in the short term. So he's the natural center for this story. And of course, remember that to me, it's about creator rights battles, and he's the creator who stood up and fought. He's the one who pushed and pushed and pushed.
Yeah. So how did you keep that focus without diminishing Joe Shuster's essential role as the artist and co-creator?
Well, Joe's still in it. I don't want to think otherwise, but if I had tried to do, the same kind of depth on Joe, then this book would literally have been 800 pages. And I think some people probably think it's too long already at 400. But there's lots of pictures. It's not as bad as it sounds.
Don't
But
discount the picture.
even this story about Jerry, my first draft that I turned into the publisher was 30,000 words longer than what's been published. That's a lot of cutting, but they felt like I was going to limit my audience. We're trying to get not just, comic book collectors, but general public readers. And we're probably not going to do that at 700 pages or whatever. So it needed to be cut. And it is, again, like I was saying, painful when you've gone to all this work to come up with all of this stuff. But you know what? I think the book is better afterwards, after it's trimmed down and I think more narrowly focused onto Jerry Siegel's story. I think the cutting actually improved it.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of different rabbit holes you could fall down, and I remember when I was first started university and we were required to write 1,000-word essay, I was like, 1,000 words? How am I going to ever write 1,000 words? And they just cut 30,000 words.
Yeah, that's how. From the end.
So Bill, let's jump into Clark Kent, Superman, and Jerry Siegel some more. Your research suggests that the relationship between Clark Kent and Superman becomes more understandable when they understand Jerry Siegel himself. How much of Jerry can we see in Clark, and how much of Jerry's hopes or frustrations can we see in Superman?
Oh, I think Jerry Siegel is Clark Kent. I mean, he's taller and slimmer perhaps, but it's Jerry, even down to the stuttering and the awkwardness around women and, not being awkward in social situations. It's totally Jerry. He might have picked up a few characteristics elsewhere, but even the coin glasses, those are Jerry's. And Joe's the one drawing it, and who knows Jerry better at this time? And I think he loved the idea that, I look like me on the outside, but inside, underneath this blue suit, I'm the strongest guy on the planet who, Lois adores, unlike Clark Kent. So he basically created a lover's triangle where one guy's two of the sides of the triangle, just depending on what clothes he's wearing, which really was kind of genius, actually.
Yeah, so Clark Kent was more than merely a disguise. It was more an autobiographical character, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, and in a way, it's like a Cinderella story for guys, I may look like an ordinary person, but I have seriously hidden depths.
I mean, who doesn't? I want the phone booth. We still have the phone booths here in South Korea, and I still just want to go in there and just find out, is there a cape in there somewhere?
Yes.
So does Superman resent power, recognition, romantic confidence, or all three? Did he represent power, recognition, or romantic confidence, or all three?
Okay, let me think. Power, romantic confidence. What was the other one?
Recognition.
Recognition.
Did
Well,
he represent that?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you were going to go ahead.
So as Superman, his character, would you say Superman represents power, recognition, and romantic confidence, or all three?
Hmm.
Because of Lois Lane, right?
Yeah, well, this is impossible to answer really when there have been 70 years of Superman and multiple interpretations. Jerry Siegel's definitely represented power. I don't know about romantic confidence since we never saw Superman with anyone romantically for years and years and years. People definitely started to recognize him, although not at first. Even, there was a radio show that started in 1942, and for years, there are no actual sightings of Superman on the show. It's just, oh, who'd believe that? Some guy floating around. You think, why? I mean, it's already in the comic books. What's the point of this? But anyway, yeah, there have
Yeah.
been so many different interpretations that it would be hard to define one. I can say which ones I like best, but that's not the same question.
So yeah, you would maybe argue that Clark Kent strongly reflected Jerry's appearance, his shyness and feelings of being overlooked, while Superman
Yeah,
embodied the strength and recognition Jerry wished others could see in himself, within him,
yeah,
right?
totally.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, we all need that alter ego for sure. So let's talk about why Superman appeared at that moment. So Superman emerged during the Great Depression and a period of economic anxiety, social exclusion, and a growing global danger. Why was that particular moment ready for a character like Superman?
Well, I think you've already nailed it. I mean, and it was not just the economy that was in the dumper, but that meant, a quarter of the population was out of work. And there was clearly looming war in Europe, and all crime was on the rise. The mob, prohibition ended, but the mob did not. And so, particularly for a relatively poor kid in Cleveland, it could be a dangerous world. And of course, I think that's a part of why Superman was such an immediate sensation. He was, as Jerry said in the first story, the champion of the weak and oppressed, coming exactly at the time when people wanted a champion of the weak and oppressed, because bad stuff was looming.
Oh, absolutely. And when we're thinking about Jerry and Joe's own background shaping the moral purpose, how important was the Jewish immigrant experience to the character's origins?
Well, others have pointed out that Superman is an immigrant, after all.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know why that was a big surprise last year, but he's always come from somewhere else. It's really kind of a outer space version of Moses, right? Because he's in a place that's becoming very dangerous. So his mom puts him in a basket, and he goes a long ways and gets adopted by other people and eventually becomes a champion of those people. So that story seems very familiar. The cover of Superman #4 is Superman bringing down the pillars of the temple in what is clearly, I think, a Samson reference. And there are other ways that you can see that Jerry's education and religion were showing up in the work. I don't think it ever became it was never such that anybody who wasn't Jewish would probably even notice, but it was always there. His mom, contrary to what some of the people have said, was actually very religious and went to synagogue 3 times a week. I don't think Jerry was all that observant as an adult, but I don't think he would have had any choice about it when he was a kid.
No doubt. So let's not forget about Joe. I'm thinking about Joe
Yep.
now. So when people discuss the creation of Superman, Jerry's persistence in writing naturally received the enormous attention. We talked about how Joe, how to balance that in your writing, but what does the public still misunderstand or underestimate about Joe Shuster?
Well, that would depend on who you're talking about, but some people did criticize his art in the early days, and that might have been one of the main factors in Superman never getting picked up by a newspaper syndicate. I don't really think so. I think it had a lot of strikes against it, but I think Joe's art is just perfect for exactly what it's doing, which is illustrating in a magazine designed for kids an action feature. And some people have called his art primitive, but I would say it's simple. It looks like something you too might draw if you just practiced a little bit more. And Joe had a real economy. He could make a single line do a lot of things and lend a lot of energy to the picture. He wasn't a fast worker, and he started developing eyesight problems that made it even harder for him to work. But I think he gave the early Superman exactly what he needed to succeed, which is obvious since he succeeded so spectacularly.
Yeah, absolutely. It gave people the audience, that visual that they can identify with and believe in, right? So now, Bill, I want to jump to a random thing.
Okay.
The famous $130 payment has become shorthand for the loss of Superman. What actually happened in that transaction? We kind of touched on a little bit. And what important context disappears when the story is reduced to one shocking number?
Well, I don't even think that's the worst thing that happened. But and by the way, that check you just mentioned was sold at auction a couple of years ago for $160,000.
Oh, seriously? Wow.
But that contract I mentioned before that Jerry signed that he shouldn't, that gave them all the rights, did call for the payment of $130. But here's why I don't agree with what people say. They got $130 for a 13-page story because their rate was $10 a page. So that $130 was payment for the story. They didn't get anything additional for the rights to the characters and the feature. They just lost it. So I think you could argue they sold Superman for nothing more than what they were already entitled to get, which is really, tragic and appalling.
So Jerry and Joe didn't really understand the rights they were surrendering.
No,
Right?
I don't think they did at all. But remember, they've been working. One, they're young. Jerry lost his father when he was 17. Joe's father was an elevator operator for a hospital. They didn't have any mentors, people with business experience and advice. Plus, Jerry, I think, tended to be a little headstrong and, should have gotten a lawyer, but didn't. And boy, did he regret it later. But then again, bear in mind that these guys have been working for the Major, who did things very differently for a couple of years. The Major was a writer himself and probably as a result always treated writers well. He never tried to grab the rights to the characters. He just got North American first serial rights, publish it once and then it's back to you. Never tried to own the characters. So Jerry was not accustomed to be treated the way the new owners suddenly started treating him at all. And he made more than one, but he made one really bad mistake in signing that letter agreement.
So how quickly did they realize the deal had limited their future?
Oh, immediately. Of course, the first Superman comic comes out and it's an immediate hit, and Jerry and Joe's page rate isn't going to get any bigger. And they do, in connection with a newspaper strip, get a little bit better terms, but they didn't get a fraction of what the suits were getting. And then they were getting nothing after they stood up and fought for their rights.
And we've been touching on a lot of the different elements of the legalities that were going on. So the book involves mob connections, blackballing, broken agreements, threatening correspondence, corporate maneuvering, and decades of litigation, which is still ongoing, as you said. Which discovery made you stop and think, this sounds too outrageous to be real?
Okay, for the litigation is not still ongoing. The litigation ended in 2016. So we're good. And I don't see any reason why there should be any more. The Shuster family tried something last year with regard to the new movie that was coming out, but it didn't work. And I don't think we're going to hear any more than that. Superman goes into the public domain in 2033. So I don't know what happens to all these agreements then. We'll probably just have to wait and find out. And now that I've given all those factoids, I've forgotten what your question was supposed to be. About the mob connections. How did I get off on that? Whatever.
Well, it was a culmination of many things, yes.
Harry Donenfeld was the new owner, and he had, he bragged about his mob connections. He was best buds with Frank Costello, and they'd go to the Waldorf Astoria and get manicures together and all that gangster stuff.
Yeah,
he had been a rum runner. Go ahead.
When I think of mobs, I always think of, Bonnie and Clyde and
Yeah.
those kind of things. The Godfather.
Yeah, I don't think Harry was in the mob, but he was very friendly with them, and definitely with his pal Jack Leibowitz engaged in what many have called mob tactics. Certainly, that's how Jerry felt about it at every step of the way.
Absolutely. And so now there's a sensitive question. Some of the people in this story are capable of extraordinary ruthlessness, and at other moments, surprisingly generous, right? What
Yeah.
is the important to resist turning the history into a simple heroes versus villains narrative?
Are you talking about Harry again and what we learned
Yeah,
about
was it
him
important
later
to
on?
was it important to
Yeah.
resist turning the history into a simple heroes versus villains narrative?
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Because what she's referring to is that, and I can't take credit for this discovery. This was revealed in a book called The American Way, for obvious reasons, that, to cut to the chase, revealed that Harry Donenfeld, at the same time that he's treating Siegel and Schuster and a lot of other creatives very poorly, is taking all this newfound Superman money, well, not all of it, but some of it, and using it to sponsor Jewish refugees, mostly people from Eastern Europe trying to, get away, because at that time America had strong anti-immigration laws, and if you didn't have a sponsor, you were going to get in. And the sponsoring could be as much as a $5,000 commitment. So this is a significant deal, even for somebody who's wealthy. And he did this over and over again for years. People have estimated that he saved about 1,200 people by bringing them out of Nazi territory into the United States. Roughly the same amount that Oskar Schindler of Schindler's List saved. And this is that just shows you how complex the human mind is to me, because somebody who could be so ruthless and mobstery in his professional life could do wonderful acts of charity elsewhere.
Would you say that as you research, he's the character who became more morally complicated the more you researched him?
Yeah, I think that would be fair. I mean, I don't know why he did that. I could speculate. I think his wife brought a lot of pressure to bear, but so what? He did it, and I think we got to give him props for that. It's probably not unlike other people who we think are in ruthless business people, but they're really nice to their cat when they come home, or what. They're outside of movies and maybe some books. People are not normally all bad.
There's got to be some good in there somewhere, I believe. And that
Yeah.
brings us to the central tension of the book, the distance between what someone might legally possess and what justice may morally require. So let's talk about contracts, credit, ownership, and justice right now. You ready?
Yep.
So as a lawyer, how do you distinguish legal ownership from moral authorship? Can a company legally own a character while still owing something profound to the people who created him?
Well, I think, of course, I'm a creator, so I would think this, but I think the creator should always be on the loop. It's like the laws in some states, not all, that hold that anytime a painting is resold, a portion has to go to the original artist. So we'd don't have travesties where, somebody who died penniless, or they're, couldn't leave their family anything. Their paintings are now selling for $70 million. I think that should be applicable everywhere. If we don't treat our creators well, then we're not going to have them very long. There's already so much disincentive to create things. Another thing I hear a lot is people say, well, Superman wouldn't have taken off without the comic book company. And I'm like, well, yeah, it had to be published, but are these guys the only one who could do it? No. Did they do anything special that promoted it? No, it was just Superman. It was the right idea at the right time, and they benefited from it. But I don't think anything gives you the right to cut out the original creators. We got to
Absolutely
give
not.
credit where due.
And it feels like Jerry really paved the way for us now, so that the creator credit is a moral right, even when ownership is transferred, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Goodness for Jerry. So, but they signed the contract. So a common
They did.
response to stories like this, they signed the contract, so that should be the end of the discussion. As both a lawyer and an author, what does that argument fail to understand?
Well, I would say everything we just said about creators and their rights, but I don't think I said this before. Congress amended the Copyright Act in the late 1970s, and among the other changes to the law was a provision that creators can recover the rights to their creation after 50 years, no matter who you sold, assigned, whatever dumb thing you did. You can get it back after 50 years. You have to jump through these hoops, but it's possible. And that's what sparked the later litigation that Jerry Siegel's wife initiated. She sued under that new law. But why did Congress make that new law? I think it was because people were appalled by situations like, if not specifically and prominently, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who got enormous publicity in 1975 that finally resulted in them getting a pension. I think that was very much on Congress's mind when they allowed people to recover their rights after a long, long time, if you're still around. but I think that's a recognition of what you're saying. Our authors and artists should never be completely severed from their work.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of obvious. So that at one point, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's names were removed from the work they created. And that loss of credit is so painful, and even sometimes even more painful than the loss of money. How did you feel about that? Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I think he got so much joy when that first Christopher Reeve movie came out, and 4 minutes and 16 seconds in, there's his credit. Whoosh! Superman, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And Laura told me that, she was in the theater with him at the red carpet premiere, and she looks over. Of course, the audience is cheering, and she looks at her dad, and tears coming down his eyes. And he didn't get any money from that movie. Zero. He had no involvement, but he saw his name associated with his character again, and that meant everything.
So do you think that Jerry was primarily fighting for the compensation, for control, or the acknowledgement, or the place at the table?
Well, I'm sure he would have been happy to have all of the above. But I think the order really would have been credit, money, seat at table would be my guess. Although he wanted all of those, I don't know. That's hard to say. But you identified the three big ones.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the human cost too. So it's because it's easy to discuss copyright ownership and litigation as abstract legal subjects. But
Right.
As humans, the battle actually cost Jerry and Joe so much, in your opinion, right?
Yeah.
What would that be?
Well, they were severed from their character. They were severed from an income, and they could tell people, but the Superman didn't cover their names anymore. They were, there's also a thing going around in Superman circles that Jerry does nothing but whine from throughout the 1950s. It's not true at all. He hustled like you wouldn't believe. That's all in the book. Now, Joe had to slow down a little bit because of her eyesight problems, although he still worked too. But what happened to them is a tragic thing.
So was
Elizabeth, I apologize, but I need to go.
Oh my goodness, it's time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I want to thank you so much for joining Gimme 5. And I could probably talk to you all day about Superman because I love Superman.
Well, we'll do it again next year.
Hey, absolutely. So thank you so much, William, Bill, for being on the show. And I look forward to the next one.
Great. Thanks.
And with that, we're going to bring today's conversation to a close. My sincere thanks to William Bernhardt for joining me and giving us a glimpse behind one of the most recognizable symbols in popular culture and into the lives of the human beings whose imagination made that symbol possible. As today's conversation demonstrates, the history behind Superman contains far more than any single interview could fully explore. It is a story of creative ambition, legal conflict, corporate power, family persistence, recognition, and the difficult question of who should benefit when an idea grows far beyond anything its creators could have ever imagined. The book, William Bernhardt's website, and additional information about his work will be linked in the description box below. And I would love to hear your thoughts and comments. Is there ever a point when a creator should trade ownership for opportunity? Or can a chance to finally be published make it too easy to surrender something whose true value has not yet been discovered? Please like this video, subscribe to Gimme 5, and share this conversation with a reader, writer, artist, comic book fan, or anyone who still believes publishing contracts make relaxing bedtime reading. Until next time, keep reading, keep creating, and keep asking what happened behind the story. I'm Elizabeth O'Carroll, and this has been Gimme 5. See you next time.